Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into Doctor Strange, the 2016 Marvel superhero film that takes you on an incredible journey into mysticism, magic, and the untapped potential of the human mind. I first watched this movie years ago, and every time I revisit it, it feels like stepping into an entirely new world. Some scenes are mind-bending, literally twisting reality in ways you won't expect, while others pull at your emotions and heartstrings. Overall, it's an experience that's visually spectacular, emotionally engaging, and deeply thought-provoking. Dr. Stephen Strange is introduced as one of the world's most talented neurosurgeons, a man whose hands are instruments of incredible skill, allowing him to perform operations that save countless lives. His reputation is flawless, his wealth substantial, and his ego colossal. Strange's confidence borders on arrogance, and his personality is built around the precision, logic, and mastery that defined his medical career. Everything in his life appears perfectly aligned until a catastrophic car accident changes everything. In a single instant, his hands are shattered beyond repair, leaving him unable to operate. For a man whose identity and self-worth are tied to his surgical abilities, this is a profound blow, throwing him into both physical and emotional despair. Christine Palmer, his former colleague and love interest, attempts to help him navigate the trauma. But Strange's pride and obsession with regaining his former capabilities make her efforts only partially effective. Desperation drives him to explore every experimental therapy, every new surgical technique, but nothing works. With each failure, Strange's frustration deepens, his confidence wanes, and depression begins to settle in. The limits of conventional medicine confront him for the first time, revealing that the world he thought he understood, one of science, logic, and control, is not enough to restore what he has lost. Amid this darkness, Strange hears the story of Jonathan Pangborn, a paraplegic who mysteriously regained the use of his legs. Unlike anything Strange has ever seen or understood, Pangborn's recovery is miraculous, a testament to forces beyond the physical realm. This sparks a fragile thread of hope in Strange, who follows Pangborn's guidance to Kamatash, a hidden monastery in Kathmandu, where ancient mystic arts are taught and protected. Here, Strange encounters the Ancient One, a centuries-old sorcerer of extraordinary power who has mentored generations of practitioners, including Caecilius, who would later become Strange's adversary. The Ancient One introduces Strange to a world beyond the physical reality where magic, dimensions, and the laws of nature bend in ways that challenge everything he has ever known. Astral projection, mirror dimensions, and time manipulation are all elements of this mystical universe, and initially, Strange is skeptical. His scientific mind struggles to reconcile these phenomena with reason, but the Ancient One recognizes his exceptional intellect and potential. Strange's arrogance, initially a barrier, becomes a driving force that accelerates his learning. Under the guidance of Mordo, the Ancient One's loyal disciple, Strange begins rigorous training. Mordo teaches discipline, patience, and adherence to the natural laws of magic, while Strange's impulsive nature and tendency to take risks often clash with his philosophy. This tension creates friction, but it also sparks growth. Strange's intellect and quick adaptation allow him to advance rapidly, mastering techniques that other sorcerers would take years to learn. Secretly, he studies forbidden texts stolen by Caecilius, learning to manipulate time using the Eye of Agamotto, a powerful artifact capable of bending reality in ways that ordinary mortals cannot comprehend. Meanwhile, Caecilius, once a student of the Ancient One, becomes consumed by the desire for eternal life. Disillusioned with the limits of the natural world, he seeks to harness the dark dimension, a place where time does not exist and immortality is possible. With a cult of zealots, Caecilius attacks Kamatash, killing its librarian and stealing critical mystical texts. The Ancient One pursues them, but Caecilius's power and cunning allow him to escape. Strange witnesses, firsthand, the devastating consequences of misused power and begins to understand the gravity of his new reality. Training intensifies. Strange learns to levitate, manipulate energy, create shields, and travel through alternate dimensions. The Cloak of Levitation, a sentient magical artifact, chooses Strange as its master, providing guidance, protection, and a companion in his journey. Through trial and error, he discovers that raw power is meaningless without wisdom, and mastery without discipline can be catastrophic. His perspective shifts from selfish ambition to responsibility. To the safety of the earth and the balance of the mystical universe depend on his choices. The first major confrontation occurs when Caecilius and his zealots attack the New York Sanctum. Strange faces overwhelming odds and finds himself initially outmatched. Yet his medical training, with its focus on precision, improvisation, and strategy, gives him an edge. Using the cloak in the eye of Agamotto, he creatively counters attacks, manipulating time and space in ways that disorient his enemies. This encounter becomes a defining moment, cementing Strange's understanding that intelligence, creativity, and adaptability are as vital as raw magical ability. Caecilius continues his campaign, systematically targeting the three sanctums of Earth to weaken its defenses. Strange, alongside Master Wang, studies their methods and patterns, developing strategic defenses and countermeasures. Each challenge tests his skills, resourcefulness, and ethical judgment, forcing him to grow not just as a sorcerer, but as a protector of Earth. Slowly, he transitions from a brilliant, but self-absorbed surgeon, to a guardian who understands the stakes, the sacrifices, and the responsibilities that come with power. Throughout these trials, Strange forms alliances and confronts moral dilemmas that push him to question the nature of power, control, and mortality. He must navigate a world where the laws of reality are malleable, where enemies wield unimaginable abilities, and where every choice carries far-reaching consequences. His journey is both internal and external, a test of character, intellect, and spirit. By the end of this sequence of events, Strange is no longer the man he was before the accident. He has been reshaped by adversity, knowledge, and experience, standing at the threshold of true mastery over the mystical arts. As Stephen Strange's hands trembled in the hospital room, the weight of his new reality pressed down on him more than any surgical challenge ever had. The car crash had shattered not just the bones in his hands but also the illusions of control he had always clung to. Christine Palmer's concern was unwavering, yet her empathy could only reach so far. Strange's mind, brilliant but increasingly desperate, searched for a solution in every corner of modern medicine, every experimental procedure that might restore the dexterity he once took for granted. But the universe, it seemed, had a plan far beyond scalpel and suture. With each failed attempt, his arrogance slowly gave way to frustration, and frustration teetered dangerously close to despair. Strange found himself haunted not just by the physical limitations but by the crushing sense of identity loss. His skill, the core of who he had always been, seemed to vanish with every unresponsive nerve and every failed incision. Nights were worst. The silence of his apartment in Manhattan, once a place of comfort and calculated control, became a prison where the echoes of failure reverberated endlessly. He would stare at his hands, now fragile and almost alien, imagining the fine, precise movements that had once been second nature, slipping further and further from his grasp. His life, previously measured in successful operations and accolades, now seemed ruled by the cruel randomness of fate. In this darkness, even Christine's gentle voice sometimes felt like a reminder of what he had lost rather than a source of solace. One day, the faint glimmer of hope arrived in the form of a story that seemed almost fantastical. Strange learnt about Jonathan Pangborn, a man who had suffered paralysis, but had mysteriously regained his ability to walk. Initially skeptical, Strange dismissed it as an improbable medical anomaly, yet the thought lingered like a persistent whisper. Desperation, however, makes even the most rational minds reach for the improbable, and Strange found himself compelled to seek out Pangborn. When he finally met the man, he witnessed a calm confidence, a serenity that suggested a mastery over forces that could bend reality itself. Pangborn spoke of Kamar-Taj, a place hidden from the mundane world, where knowledge far beyond the realm of conventional science was not only taught but wielded. It was a world where the mind could reshape matter, where reality could be questioned, and where limits could be transcended. Strange, desperate to reclaim not only his hands, but the very sense of self tied to them, took the leap into the unknown. He left behind the sterile corridors of hospitals, the controlled precision of surgical theaters, and stepped into a universe that challenged every assumption he had ever held. Arriving at Kamar-Taj, he encountered Mordo, a sorcerer of disciplined and resolute demeanor, who initially observed Strange with a wary curiosity. Mordo, representing the balance of knowledge and responsibility, saw both potential and danger in this brilliant yet flawed man. The Ancient One, ethereal and enigmatic, regarded Strange with a mixture of patience and quiet challenge, her presence simultaneously comforting and disconcerting. She revealed to him the multiverse, the astral plane, and dimensions that defied conventional perception. The city streets folded into themselves, buildings turned at impossible angles, and space became fluid under her guidance. Strange's arrogance, once an asset in the operating room, collided with forces beyond his comprehension. He struggled to grasp even the simplest of concepts, such as projecting his astral form or understanding the mirror dimension. a world where illusions could be made real and reality itself could be temporarily suspended. Yet, as days passed, his mind, conditioned by years of intellectual rigor, began to adapt. He observed patterns, learned incantations, and experimented with mystical constructs. The sense of control he craved so desperately was slowly returning, not through his hands, but through mastery of forces far more potent than scalpels or sutures. Caecilius, a former student of the Ancient One, loomed as the looming threat that tested Strange's nascent abilities. His zeal, corrupted by a desire for immortality, led him to seek the power of the dark dimension. Caecilius believed that the limits of life and death were an injustice, and that by drawing power from the dark dimension, he could achieve eternal existence. The Ancient One's teachings warned of such temptations, stressing that the natural order must be respected, and that the pursuit of limitless life at the expense of reality itself was a path of ruin. Strange, absorbing these lessons, became acutely aware that knowledge and power carried responsibility. Every spell, every manipulation of time or space had consequences. The stakes were not theoretical. They were immediate and life-threatening. Caecilius' followers, equally devoted and dangerous, attacked the New York Sanctum, destroying the protective wards and leaving the city vulnerable. Strange, donning the cloak of levitation for the first time, faced both fear and exhilaration. The cloak, seemingly alive and sentient, became his ally and guide, responding to his will yet challenging him to master coordination, timing, and intuition beyond any surgical precision he had ever achieved. Despite setbacks and initial injuries, Strange adapted rapidly, learning to bend time through the Eye of Agamotto, an artifact of immense mystical power. The eye allowed him to manipulate the flow of events, creating loops and reversing outcomes in ways that no mortal could comprehend. Yet, this power required discipline and clarity of mind. Mistakes could unravel reality itself. Mordo and Wang, strict adherents to the natural laws, cautioned Strange against overreach, highlighting the peril that awaited anyone who disregarded boundaries. The tension between Caecilius' reckless pursuit of immortality and Strange's emerging sense of responsibility created a crucible in which he was tested at every turn. He discovered that the universe was far more complex than the linear, cause-and-effect world of science and medicine he had known. Forces moved not in straight lines but in cycles, paradoxes, and interwoven threads that demanded both intellect and intuition. Each lesson, each confrontation with Caecilius' followers, honed his skill and sharpened his understanding of what it meant to be a protector of reality, rather than merely a master of one's own body. A pivotal moment arrived in Hong Kong, where Caecilius' assault threatened to engulf the city in the dark dimension. Buildings twisted, the ground fractured, and reality itself seemed to scream under the strain of uncontrolled power. Strange, combining his newfound skills, courage, and ingenuity, created an endless time loop around Dormammu, the entity ruling the dark dimension. In this loop, Strange faced death repeatedly, experiencing the consequences of failure over and over. Yet, each repetition strengthened his resolve, honed his strategy, and tested his understanding of patience and persistence. Dormammu, initially unyielding, ultimately accepted a bargain, leaving Earth in exchange for Caecilius and his zealots being taken back into the dark dimension. Through strategy, intelligence, and a willingness to endure personal suffering, Strange achieved victory without resorting to sheer force alone. In the aftermath, the repercussions of the battle reshaped the relationships between the Soul Shavers. Mordo, disillusioned by the bending of natural laws, even in the service of good, renounced the path of a sorcerer, leaving Strange with the weight of responsibility for the protection of the Earth and the balance of mystical forces. Strange returned the Eye of Agamotto to its rightful place, understanding that power must be wielded with care, and took up residence in the New York Sanctum. He continued his training under Wang's guidance, preparing for future threats and embracing the humbling realization that mastery required both knowledge and restraint. As he grew into his role, Strange also recognized the importance of humility, empathy, and ethical responsibilities, qualities that no surgical skill could instill, but were essential for the guardian of reality. By the time he reconnected with Christine Palmer, Strange had transformed from a brilliant but arrogant surgeon into a formidable yet disciplined sorcerer. The city, though scarred by the recent assault, now rested under his watchful protection. Strange's journey had been one of profound loss, relentless effort, and eventual enlightenment. The lessons of patience, self-sacrifice, and the careful balance of power had redefined his identity. No longer confined to the narrow world of medicine, he had expanded into a realm where intellect met mysticism, ambition met responsibility, and human limitations were challenged by extraordinary potential. With every spell he cast, every threat he neutralized, Strange solidified his place, not only as a master of the mystic arts, but as a protector of a fragile reality, where the choices of a single individual could have consequences that resonated across dimensions. Stephen Strange's training at Kamar-Taj deepens, and with every passing day, his frustration slowly transforms into obsession. What initially felt like humiliation begins to ignite a dangerous hunger for mastery. While other students struggle to grasp basic spells, Strange absorbs knowledge at an unnatural pace. He spends long nights in the library, poring over ancient texts, driven less by discipline and more by desperation. The mystic arts are no longer just a path to healing his hands. They become an escape from the man he once was. Wang watches him carefully, sensing that Strange's brilliance is tied to recklessness. Mordo, on the other hand, respects Strange's progress, but worries that his willingness to break rules mirrors the same arrogance that once led Caecilius astray. As Strange studies the structure of reality itself, he learns that the universe is layered with dimensions beyond human perception. Earth is protected by powerful barriers anchored to 3 sanctums located in New York, London, and Hong Kong. These sanctums act as shields against dark entities seeking to invade the physical world. Strange begins to understand that sorcerers are not heroes in the traditional sense. They are guardians who preserve balance, often unseen and unflanked. This realization humbles him slightly, but it also feeds his desire to be essential again. He is no longer a surgeon saving lives with precision tools. Now, he wants to be something greater. Despite strict warnings, Strange secretly studies a forbidden book salvaged from Caecilius' earlier theft. Within its pages lies the Eye of Agamotto, an artifact capable of manipulating time itself. Strange's curiosity overwhelms his caution. When he experiments with the eye, he bends time backward, restoring damaged objects and reversing events in a confined space. The power is intoxicating. Mordo and Wong confront him, emphasizing that tampering with time carries catastrophic consequences. They remind him that Caecilius sought immortality through similar defiance, and that such actions always demand a terrible price. Strange listens, but deep down, he believes his intentions make him different. Meanwhile, Caecilius continues his campaign against Earth's defenses. Fueled by grief over his lost family and disillusionment with mortality, he believes the dark dimension offers freedom from pain and death. Under Dormammu's influence, he sees the Ancient One as a hypocrite who secretly draws power from the very darkness she condemns. When Caecilius attacks the London Sanctum, its destruction sends shockwaves through the mystic network, protecting Earth. Strange senses the imbalance even from afar. Realizing that the war he has been training for is no longer theoretical, the battle soon reaches New York. Caecilius and his zealots assault the New York Sanctum with ruthless precision, warping reality and bending the cityscape into impossible shapes. Strange, still inexperienced, is forced into combat far sooner than expected. In the chaos, the Cloak of Levitation chooses him, responding to his determination and instinct. Though injured and overwhelmed, Strange fights back using creativity rather than raw strength, using portals and illusions to survive. When he is stabbed during the fight, he barely escapes with his life, teleporting himself to a hospital, where Christine Palmer unknowingly saves him once again. This moment is deeply ironic for Strange. Christine represents the life he lost, the world of logic and medicine he once dominated. Even as she saves him, he cannot explain the truth without sounding insane. The distance between them becomes painfully clear. Strange returns to the sanctum, physically wounded but mentally sharpened. He now understands that knowledge alone is not enough. Every spell, every choice, has consequences that extend beyond himself. As events spiral out of control, Strange uncovers the Ancient One's greatest secret. She has prolonged her own life by drawing energy from the dark dimension. Mordo, who has followed the rules with unwavering faith, is devastated by this revelation. To him, the Ancient One's actions are no different from the discovery fractures his trust and plants the seeds of bitterness that will later define his path. Strange, however, views the truth differently. He sees the Ancient One not as a hypocrite, but as someone who made impossible choices to protect the world. When Caecilius confronts the Ancient One in the mirror dimension, the battle becomes a philosophical clash as much as a physical one. She refuses to kill him, believing that violence will only validate his beliefs. During the fight, she is mortally wounded, and transported back to New York. In her final moments, she speaks to Strange not as a student, but as a successor. She tells him that greatness is not defined by power, but by the willingness to stand alone and make hard decisions. Her death leaves Strange and Mordo unanchored, forced to face the consequences of a world without her guidance. With the Hong Kong sanctum destroyed and Dormammu's dark dimension bleeding into reality, Earth stands on the brink of annihilation. Strange makes a choice that defines him. Rather than fighting Dormammu with force, he uses the Eye of Agamotto to trap himself and the Dark Entity in an endless time loop. Over and over again Dormammu kills Strange, only for time to reset. Strange endures death repeatedly, not to win, but to negotiate. This act marks his transformation. He is no longer driven by ego or fear of loss. He is willing to suffer endlessly to protect others. Eventually Dormammu agrees to retreat, taking Caecilius and his followers with him. Earth is saved, not through strength, but through sacrifice and intelligence. The aftermath leaves scars. Mordo, disillusioned by what he sees as corruption and imbalance, abandons the Mystic Order entirely. Strange returns the Eye to accepting responsibility for his actions, without seeking praise. He chooses to remain in the New York sanctum, no longer as a man trying to fix himself, but as a guardian prepared to lose everything if necessary. After the confrontation with Dormammu, Strange begins to understand the true scope of his responsibilities. The mystic arts are no longer a series of challenges or tests. They are the fragile lines that separate Earth from chaos. He spends his days meditating, refining his spells, and exploring the limits of reality through the mirror dimension. Each portal, each incantation, becomes more precise, more confident. Strange is no longer the arrogant surgeon who sought shortcuts to regain his hands. He has become a strategist, a thinker, a sorcerer, capable of manipulating time and space, without arrogance clouding his judgment. Yet even with these advances, he knows that threats are endless, and that knowledge is only a fraction of the true power a sorcerer must wield. Mordo's departure leaves a palpable void in the Order. Once a steadfast guardian, Mordo now sees the world as corrupted, believing that the Ancient One and others like her have compromised the rules for personal survival. Strange, while saddened by Mordo's disillusionment, begins to realize that morality is often subjective in the mystical realm. Choices must be made not based on black and white ethics, but on consequences that ripple through countless dimensions. This lesson weighs heavily on him, forcing him to reconsider every decision he makes. The Ancient One's death, once a tragic loss, becomes a source of wisdom. Her guidance remains in his mind, echoing with every spell he casts. Meanwhile, the remnants of Caecilius' followers scatter across the globe, seeking to rebuild the Dark Dimension's influence. Strange tracks them to a series of hidden cults, attempting to open miniature rifts that could grow into catastrophic breaches. Each encounter is a test of his patience, skill, and ingenuity. He uses a combination of portals, astral projection, and illusions to contain them, ensuring minimal collateral damage. The world outside New York remains largely unaware of the threats, emphasizing that a sorcerer's duty is often unseen, their victories invisible to ordinary eyes. Strange takes solace in knowing that his work saves countless lives, even if those saved never know his name. One day, Christine Palmer visits the sanctum to discuss medical advancements unrelated to magic. Strange is reminded of the life he once had, a world grounded in logic and human touch. Their conversation drifts toward his accident, and Christine questions whether he has truly found peace. Strange admits that while his body has healed, the lessons of humility and patience are ongoing, and that the mystic arts demand constant vigilance. Christine sees the man he has become dedicated, wise, and burdened by responsibilities far beyond her understanding. Their relationship, strained yet respectful, becomes a symbol of what Strange has left behind, and what he has embraced. Strange also discovers new ways to manipulate time without the Eye of Agamotto. Using complex incantations, he can briefly glimpse multiple outcomes of events, predicting attacks or environmental changes. These abilities are invaluable, as he investigates disturbances in the fabric of reality, caused by minor incursions from other dimensions. Each disturbance is a puzzle, a challenge requiring precise calculation and creativity. These moments teach him the delicate balance between action and restraint. A single miscalculation could tear a rift that would allow a creature from the Dark Dimension to enter Earth unchecked. Meanwhile, the political and mystical landscape grows increasingly complex. Leaders from other realms begin to take notice of Strange's capabilities. Dormammu's retreat has left power vacuums, and other entities who thrive in chaos are now observing Earth's defenses. Strange must navigate negotiations with magical beings and cosmic entities, some of whom view humans as insignificant. These interactions force him to refine his diplomacy skills alongside his combat abilities. He realizes that intellect, empathy, and timing are as critical as raw power. Each encounter leaves him wiser, more adaptably, and acutely aware that the survival of his world depends as much on decisions made at the table as on battles fought in the field. In the course of his studies, Strange learns of an ancient relic hidden in Tibet, capable of amplifying a sorcerer's power across dimensions. Guided by cryptic texts from the library and advice from Wang, he journeys to the Himalayan mountains, enduring harsh weather and dangerous terrain. Here, he confronts illusions and constructs designed to test not only strength but character. Unlike previous trials, these are purely philosophical, requiring him to confront fear, ego, and grief. Each success strengthens his connection to the mystical forces, while deepening his understanding of responsibility and restraint. He begins to internalize the principle that power without wisdom is destructive, a lesson Caecilius ignored to his detriment. During this expedition, Strange encounters a sect of monks who have observed his rise with caution. They challenge his motives and question whether he is ready to wield the responsibilities of a full master of the mystic arts. Strange is forced to defend his choices, explaining that his initial arrogance has been replaced by deliberate intention. He recounts how he saved New York from Caecilius and Dormammu, and the costs of those victories. Impressed but cautious, the monks offer guidance on ancient spells that allow a sorcerer to manipulate multiple dimensions simultaneously, increasing both power and vulnerability. Strange practices diligently, understanding that mastery is a balance between capability and prudence. As Strange returns to New York, a new threat emerges in the form of interdimensional anomalies appearing across the city. Buildings fold onto themselves, streets loop endlessly, and citizens report seeing impossible phenomena. Strange quickly identifies these anomalies as small-scale breaches from alternate dimensions. He works alongside Wang to stabilize the areas, employing multiple portals, spatial anchors, and temporal reversals. Each anomaly presents a unique challenge, testing his newly acquired knowledge and adaptability. The city itself becomes a dynamic chessboard, with Strange orchestrating outcomes to prevent loss of life and preserve structural integrity. Amid these crises, Strange also begins mentoring select students at Unlike his initial arrogance, he approaches teaching with patience and insight, guiding students without imposing his will. He encourages creativity and strategic thinking, emphasizing that magical skill is as much about ethics as ability. Strange's mentorship reflects his evolution from self-focused healer to a protector responsible for countless lives across multiple realities. These lessons become a new source of purpose, demonstrating that leadership is as important as mastery. Through teaching, Strange solidifies his own understanding and grows ever more capable of handling future threats. As the year progresses, Strange becomes increasingly aware of cosmic politics. Dormammu may have retreated, but other entities, both malevolent and indifferent, monitored Earth's defenses. Strange studies prophecies and scrolls, suggesting that minor actions can trigger vast consequences across timelines. This awareness fosters a sense of humility, reminding him that, despite his immense power, he is one guardian among many in a vast and complex universe. He realizes that vigilance must be constant, and that mistakes carry ramifications far beyond immediate perception. The weight of this responsibility shapes his daily routines, meditations, and strategic planning. Finally, Strange learns of a group attempting to exploit forbidden magic to access the dark dimension indirectly, using intelligence gathered through astral projection and reconnaissance spells. He locates their headquarters and confronts them with a combination of stealth, magic, and negotiation. Through careful planning and application of newly mastered spells, Strange neutralizes the threat without mass destruction. This success marks a pivotal moment. He has matured into a sorcerer who can balance offense and defense, creativity and restraint, intellect and intuition. He now fully embodies the role of Earth's protector, prepared to face whatever threats arise, from rogue sorcerers to cosmic beings, understanding that true mastery lies in knowing when to act and when to wait. The days following Strange's confrontation with the rogue sorcerers are quiet, almost deceptively so. New York returns to a fragile semblance of normalcy, though Strange knows that calm is fleeting in a world brimming with hidden dimensions and unpredictable threats. He spends hours at the Sanctum, reviewing ancient texts, experimenting with temporal manipulations, and refining spells that could one day prevent or contain breaches on a massive scale. The Eye of Agamotto sits on his desk, its subtle glow a constant reminder of the power it grants and the responsibility it demands. Each incantation is now more deliberate, every gesture more precise. Strange is aware that even minor miscalculations can cascade into catastrophic events. Christine Palmer calls again, and their conversations grow more reflective. Unlike before, there is no tension or resentment, only acknowledgement of change. Strange shares the lessons he has learned, and not just about magic, but about patience, humility, and consequence. Christine listens with admiration, recognizing that he has transformed into someone both stronger and wiser, tempered by experience yet still human in thought and emotion. Their bond remains rooted in mutual respect rather than romance or dependency, symbolizing the delicate balance between his past life as a surgeon and his present life as a sorcerer. Meanwhile, Strange is drawn to reports of subtle disturbances in New York's skyline. Streets twist unnaturally, shadows behave unpredictably, and citizens report fleeting glimpses of shapes that do not belong in reality. Using astral projection, he investigates these anomalies, tracing them to miniature rifts caused by individuals dabbling in forbidden magic. These small breaches are the first signs of a potentially larger Paterno network of vulnerabilities that could, if left unchecked, provide entry points for malevolent forces. Strange coordinates with Wang, strategically sealing rifts and reinforcing protections around the city. The process is meticulous, requiring both skill and patience, and it underscores the complexity of his new role, protector of a city and its people, as well as guardian of the fragile boundary between dimensions. Strange begins to encounter other practitioners of the mystic arts, some allies, others rivals. Each interaction challenges him to adapt, negotiate, and assert his authority without arrogance. One encounter involves a group attempting to manipulate the flow of time to accelerate personal gain. Strange intervenes, not with aggression, but with carefully crafted illusions and temporal manipulations that neutralize their plans, without causing unnecessary harm. Through these experiences, he learns the importance of balance not just in magic, but in leadership. Power is not merely a weapon. It is a tool that must be wielded responsibly, with consideration for both immediate and far-reaching consequences. During his research, Strange uncovers a fragment of a prophecy hinting at the return of a powerful entity from the dark dimension. Dormammu's absence has not erased his influence. Residual energy lingers, and certain artifacts contain traces of his power. Strange studies these texts carefully, using both logic and intuition to interpret warnings hidden within the metaphors and cryptic language. He realizes that foresight and preparation are as crucial as reaction. He begins devising contingency plans, constructing wards, and strategizing potential interventions, aware that foresight alone cannot prevent every disaster but can mitigate the scale of harm. In parallel, Strange explores more advanced applications of the mirror dimension. He discovers that by layering multiple planes upon one another, he can create spaces where time and physics behave differently, providing both defensive advantages and training opportunities. He constructs simulations to test his responses against various interdimensional threats, effectively creating a controlled environment to practice strategy, combat, and spellcasting. Each experiment sharpens his abilities, and through trial and error, he refines techniques for containing anomalies without causing collateral damage. These sessions are exhausting but crucial, shaping him into a sorcerer capable of anticipating multiple scenarios and adapting dynamically to each. A notable challenge arises when a small faction attempts to harness energy from the dark dimension through an unstable artifact. Strange, sensing the magnitude of danger, mobilizes to intercept them. He confronts the group in a deserted industrial sector, where reality begins to warp around them. Strange uses a combination of portals, illusions, and temporal freezes to isolate each member and neutralize the artifact. The encounter is physically and mentally taxing, demanding that he synchronize multiple magical constructs while maintaining awareness of potential consequences. By the end, the artifact is secured, the culprits detained or incapacitated, and New York remains unharmed. Strange reflects on the experience, recognizing that vigilance is a continuous requirement and that complacency is a greater threat than any single adversary. Amid these events, Strange contemplates his relationship with the other Avengers. Although he has not yet fully interacted with them in the new context of post-Civil War dynamics, he considers potential alliances and the importance of coordinating across various spheres of power. Strange's ability to manipulate time and space positions him as both a valuable asset and a potential threat if misaligned with others. He begins establishing lines of communication, sending subtle signals through mystical channels, ensuring that should crises arise, he can respond collaboratively rather than reactively. This foresight highlights his evolution from a reactive, self-focused individual to a strategic, long-term thinker who understands the interdependence of all defenders in the universe. Strange also revisits the Kamar-Taj library, studying ancient texts that detail entities even more powerful than Dormammu. Some are described as beyond comprehension, existing in states where linear time does not apply. These readings expand his understanding of the universe's complexity, challenging him to think beyond conventional paradigms. He begins developing new forms of magic that emphasize containment and protection rather than direct confrontation, realizing that sometimes the best approach is prevention and mitigation. These lessons, coupled with his experiences in the Dark Dimension, crystallize his philosophy. A true sorcerer must balance action, restraint, and foresight, understanding that the ripple effects of any decision can extend across realities. At the Sanctum, Strange continues training students, fostering both discipline and creativity. He emphasizes ethics, strategic thinking, and the interconnectedness of all things. Through mentorship, he reinforces his own mastery, while shaping a new generation of sorcerers capable of protecting the world in his absence. These interactions remind him of his own journey, the arrogance he once possessed, the humility he learned, and the responsibility that defines a master of the mystic arts. The student's successes and failures provide him with continuous feedback, sharpening his teaching methods and reinforcing the principles of wisdom, patience, and foresight. By the end of the period, Strange has solidified his position as a protector, teacher, and strategist. He understands that threats will continue to emerge, often from unexpected sources, and that mastery is a continuous process. The balance between action, preparation, and ethical judgment defines his approach. Each day reinforces the lesson that magic is not a tool for ego, but a responsibility demanding vigilance, wisdom, and compassion. Strange's journey reflects a continuous evolution, bridging the gap between the man he once was and the sorcerer the universe relies upon. Ready to confront any challenge with both intellect and heart. The days following the containment of the Dark Dimension breach are filled with study, reflection, and careful practice. Cliff Strange continues to explore the limits of his own abilities, delving into spells that manipulate time and space with increasing precision. Each experiment is measured and cautious, for he knows that even the smallest misstep could tear apart the delicate fabric of reality. Using the mirror dimension, he constructs increasingly complex scenarios in which he can safely test the consequences of his actions without endangering the world. These exercises require both concentration and creativity, and Strange finds himself constantly learning, adapting, and refining his methods. His understanding of magic has shifted from theoretical mastery to a practical, strategic awareness of its consequences. Wang remains a constant presence, assisting with both research and training. The two share a quiet camaraderie, discussing potential threats, the ethics of magic, and the balance between power and responsibility. Wang's steady nature complements Strange's impulsive tendencies, providing a grounding influence that helps temper decisions made in haste. Together, they reinforce the protective wards around the New York Sanctum and begin mapping patterns of mystical energy across the city, identifying points of weakness that could be exploited by those seeking to manipulate reality. This work is meticulous and exhausting, but it forms the foundation for a proactive defense strategy, ensuring the city remains resilient in the face of unforeseen threats. Strange receives troubling news of a new anomaly detected in London. He quickly recognizes the significance. A minor tear in reality has allowed a small fragment of the Dark Dimension's energy to seep into Earth, though contained for now. Such leaks could become gateways, if left unchecked. Using a combination of portals and astral projection, Strange travels to the source, finding residual traces of Caecilius' influence. He confronts remnants of the Zealot's followers, who are attempting to harness the energy for their own gain. Strange neutralizes the threat through a combination of clever illusions, temporal freezes, and energy manipulation. The encounter is a stark reminder that, while the immediate danger is often contained, the potential for long-term repercussions is ever present, requiring constant vigilance and foresight. As Strange continues to hone his skills, he also contemplates the wider implications of the multiverse. His recent experiences have revealed that the balance between dimensions is fragile, and that actions in one reality can have unexpected consequences in another. He begins experimenting with safe forms of interdimensional observation, seeking to anticipate potential threats before they manifest. These exercises deepen his understanding of causality, choice, and consequence, highlighting the importance of patience and measured response. Strange increasingly appreciates that mastery over magic is as much about wisdom and restraint as it is about raw power. In his personal life, Strange maintains his connection with Christine Palmer, who provides a tether to his humanity. Their conversations grow more reflective, often touching on the philosophical aspects of his work. Christine challenges him to consider not just what he can do, but what he should do, reminding him that moral responsibility is inseparable from capability. Strange values this perspective, recognizing that the lessons he has learned from the dark dimension and his initial arrogance are only part of the journey. True mastery requires balance, intellect paired with empathy, strength tempered by restraint, and power guided by purpose. New challenges emerge when reports surface of individuals attempting to tap into forbidden forms of magic through stolen relics. These relics, remnants of ancient sorcerers' experiments, contained energies capable of disrupting the flow of time and space. Strange and Wang mobilized to secure them, using a combination of detection spells and careful reconnaissance. The efforts are complicated by rival sorcerers and opportunists, seeking to exploit the artifacts for personal gain. Each retrieval mission tests Strange's ingenuity, forcing him to improvise solutions while minimizing collateral damage. The complexity of these encounters emphasizes the precariousness of his role. He is not only a defender, but also a regulator, maintaining the balance of magical power in a world that often misunderstands or fears it. Strange's work also extends to mentoring new students at Computer, though fewer in number than in previous generations. These apprentices are highly dedicated and talented. Strange focuses on instilling not only technical skill but also philosophical understanding. They must grasp the ethical dimensions of magic, the responsibility inherent in power, and the consequences of action across multiple planes of existence. Each teaching session reinforces Strange's own comprehension and discipline, reminding him that the act of passing on knowledge is itself a form of mastery. He watches as students learn to manipulate the mirror dimension, cast protective wards, and channel energy safely, feeling both pride and a renewed sense of purpose. Meanwhile, Strange becomes aware of subtle disturbances in global mystical energy patterns. Small fluctuations hint at the activities of powerful entities beyond the comprehension of ordinary humans. Through careful observation and calculation, Strange identifies patterns suggesting that the multiverse is more interconnected than previously understood. He begins documenting these anomalies, theorizing about their potential consequences, and preparing contingency plans. His research is painstaking, but he recognizes its necessity. Understanding the web of interactions between dimensions is essential to preventing large-scale catastrophe. Strange's perspective broadens as he considers the potential ripple effects of even minor events across multiple realities. The sanctum itself becomes a hub of activity, both in terms of training and research. Strange dedicates time to exploring defensive architectures, integrating knowledge from ancient texts with modern strategic concepts. He experiments with combining multiple protective spells, creating layered shields that can adapt to unforeseen threats. Wang assists by monitoring energy levels, testing stability, and providing insight based on his extensive experience. The result is a dynamic, responsive system, capable of reacting to a wide variety of mystical disturbances. Strange is pleased with these developments, understanding that foresight, preparation, and adaptability are crucial in a world where threats are both unpredictable and potentially devastating. Strange also begins to explore the limits of his own physical exertion, mental concentration, and emotional strain all take their toll. And he realizes that a sorcerer's power is as much about sustainability as it is about immediate capability. He develops routines to maintain focus, manage stress, and recover from extended use of magic. Recognizing that longevity in this line of work requires discipline in body, mind, and spirit. His training becomes holistic, integrating meditation, study, and practical exercises, ensuring that he remains effective even in prolonged crises. Throughout all these developments, Strange remains aware of his role within the larger framework of Earth's defenders. His interactions with other heroes, though limited at present, are framed by careful consideration of mutual capabilities and potential collaboration. Strange begins to establish informal networks of communication with select individuals, creating channels for rapid coordination in the event of large-scale threats. These connections reinforce his understanding that while he is immensely powerful, the collective strength of multiple protectors is essential to safeguarding both Earth and the delicate balance between dimensions. By the end of this period, Strange has solidified his mastery over a wide range of magical disciplines. He has developed a nuanced understanding of cause and effect, learned the value of strategic patience, and recognized the importance of ethical responsibility in wielding immense power. His training, research, and mentorship have transformed the Sanctum into a center of knowledge, protection, and innovation. Strange understands that threats will always arise, often unpredictably, and that his role as a sorcerer is continuous and evolving. His journey reflects an ongoing commitment to growth, responsibility, and the safeguarding of the multiverse, establishing him as both a protector and a teacher, ready for whatever challenges may come. As Doctor Strange settles into his routines at the New York Sanctum, new intelligence reaches him about mystical disruptions in remote parts of the world. Reports indicate unusual energy spikes in places like Cairo, Tokyo, and the remote forests of South America. These anomalies, subtle yet unmistakable, suggest attempts by unknown entities to pierce the boundaries between dimensions. Strange understands that while they are minor compared to the Dark Dimension breach, small disturbances can cascade into far greater consequences if left unchecked. He decides to investigate, using a combination of portals and astral projection to traverse these locations without drawing unnecessary attention. The first stop is a hidden temple in the deserts near Cairo, where Strange detects traces of a ritual designed to open a portal to another realm. Local authorities have reported disappearances, but no clear explanation exists. Strange approaches the site cautiously, observing remnants of mystical symbols etched into stone and ground, glowing faintly with residual energy. Using the cloak of levitation and his mastery of the mirror dimension, he constructs a containment field around the site to prevent further energy leakage. He then traces the origin of the ritual, discovering a rogue sorcerer attempting to harness energies beyond his control. Strange confronts him, neutralizing the immediate threat through a combination of defensive spells, time manipulation, using the Eye of Agamotto, and precise energy redirection. The rogue sorcerer is detained safely, and the area is stabilized before the local population can notice the disturbance. From Cairo, Strange quickly teleports to Tokyo, where reports of strange phenomena involve buildings bending and streets shifting inexplicably. Upon arrival, he realizes that a local cult is attempting to replicate the Dark Dimension's temporal distortions, albeit on a smaller scale. The effects are already destabilizing nearby structures and endangering civilians. Strange deploys a multi-layered strategy. He erects dimensional barriers to protect the population, then enters the mirror dimension to isolate and neutralize the energy distortions. The cultists attempt to resist, summoning ethereal constructs to defend their ritual. But Strange's experience with similar threats allows him to anticipate their moves and contain the situation efficiently. After neutralization, he seals the energy source, leaves behind wards to prevent any recurrence, ensuring the city's safety without exposing the mystical battle to the public. Strange's final investigation for this period takes him to the forests of South America, where villagers report inexplicable weather phenomena, glowing plants, and sudden, localized tremors. These signs indicate that someone is attempting to tap into ley lines that channel mystical energy across the planet. Strange carefully maps the area using a combination of astral projection and energy detection spells, discovering a group of scholars experimenting recklessly with dimensional energy. He engages them diplomatically first, explaining the risks and attempting to dissuade them from continuing their experiments. When persuasion fails, Strange demonstrates the potential catastrophic consequences by manipulating time around a contained sample, showing how quickly events could spiral beyond control. The group, shaken by the visualization, agrees to dismantle their equipment under Strange's supervision. He seals the site and leaves protective wards to ensure the forest remains stable. Back at the Sanctum, Strange reflects on these encounters, recognizing a recurring theme. While major threats like Caecilius or Dormammu are rare, smaller disturbances are frequent and can easily accumulate into crises if ignored. He documents each incident meticulously, creating a global ledger of mystical activity and anomalies. This record allows him to identify patterns, track potential threats, and anticipate future issues before they escalate. Strange also begins training in more advanced techniques for global surveillance, using astral projection to monitor distant locations while minimizing the risk of exposure or interference from other dimensions. Meanwhile, Strange receives updates from Wang about minor disturbances within New York City itself. Small but unusual energy readings suggest that fragments of previously contained magic are reasserting themselves. Strange quickly identifies that some of these are residual effects from his previous battles with Caecilius zealots. To prevent accidental breaches, he and Wang conduct systematic sweeps of the city, deploying wards and protective enchantments, and repairing weak points in the fabric of reality. These exercises are physically and mentally taxing, demanding extreme focus and careful energy management. Strange grows increasingly aware of his limitations, understanding that even a powerful sorcerer must pace himself and delegate responsibilities when possible. During one particularly intense session, Strange is interrupted by a vision of the multiverse itself. The vision shows countless realities branching off from decisions and events, some thriving, others collapsing into chaos. Strange is struck by the complexity and fragility of existence across dimensions. He realizes that the choices he makes, the containment spells he enforces, and the mentorship he provides, all have far-reaching consequences, potentially influencing not just Earth, but countless other realities. This awareness deepens his resolve to act thoughtfully and responsibly, understanding that every spell, ward, and intervention carries weight beyond immediate perception. Strange also begins exploring the nature of magical artifacts more thoroughly. He revisits relics housed in Kamar-Taj and the New York Sanctum, examining their origins, potential uses, and dangers. The relics, remnants of ancient sorcerers and mystical civilizations, contain immense power that could destabilize reality if misused. Strange develops new protocols for their storage, warding, and access, ensuring that only those with sufficient knowledge and experience can interact with them. Wang assists with cataloging, using both magical and mundane methods to record their properties, vulnerabilities, and historical significance. The result is a secure, well-monitored repository that strengthens the Sanctum's role as a global guardian. Amid these duties, Strange's personal growth continues. He learns to balance intense focus with brief moments of relaxation, ensuring mental clarity and emotional stability. He revisits meditation techniques from the Ancient One, integrating them into daily practice to maintain equilibrium. Christine Palmer occasionally visits, providing a grounding connection to his former life as a neurosurgeon, and reminding him of the human perspective that must guide even the most extraordinary abilities. Their interactions are thoughtful and reflective, emphasizing the intersection between personal ethics and professional responsibility, magical or otherwise. As the weeks progress, Strange begins experimenting with multidimensional communication. Using astral projection and enhanced spell work, he attempts to establish contact with entities in alternate realities, seeking information about disturbances before they affect Earth. These experiments are complex, requiring careful calibration to avoid attracting unwanted attention from powerful interdimensional beings. Strange is careful to record every attempt, noting patterns, successes, and potential risks. This ongoing research positions him not only as a protector of his own dimension but also as an early warning sentinel for cross-dimensional threats, capable of intervening before crises escalate. Late one night, while reviewing recent anomalies, Strange detects a familiar but alarming pattern, traces of energy that echo Dormammu's influence. Though the dark dimension itself has been sealed and Dormammu's direct incursions prevented, subtle remnants of its essence linger in certain locations, potentially interacting with other dimensions. Strange's heart quickens as he realizes that vigilance is never complete. The multiverse is vast, and even the smallest tear could allow powerful entities to re-emerge. He consults with Wang, carefully outlining strategies for early detection, containment, and mitigation. Together, they develop contingency plans for potential breaches, balancing proactive defense with the necessity of remaining unobtrusive. The culmination of this period finds Strange standing atop the Sanctum, looking out over the city. The skyline glows in the evening light, bustling with life, unaware of the magical battles fought in its shadows. Strange feels a mix of pride and responsibility, aware that the peace is temporary and must be defended continually. His journey from a brilliant but arrogant neurosurgeon to a disciplined and ethical master of the mystic arts has been arduous, marked by danger, discovery, and personal growth. Yet he understands that the path ahead will demand constant vigilance, innovation, and sacrifice, as the safety of his dimension and countless other stress upon his continued mastery and discernment. Strange continued his intensive training under the watchful eyes of the Ancient One and Mordo, gradually mastering the fundamentals of manipulating time and space. Each day brought new challenges, from bending reality to accessing the astral plane, and Strange's confidence began to grow alongside his abilities. He discovered the intricate balance between his intellect and mystical intuition, realizing that raw knowledge alone could never substitute for the focus and discipline required of a sorcerer. The ancient texts he pored over revealed cryptic symbols and incantations, each of which held layers of meaning. teaching him that understanding the underlying principles was as important as memorizing the spells themselves. Despite the rigorous training, Strange found his mind racing constantly with questions, often impatient to skip ahead to the more spectacular powers that seemed within reach, but required mastery of the subtle basics first. Mordo observed Strange's progress carefully, noting the ambition in his eyes. He warned him repeatedly about overreaching, cautioning that the desire for power without respect for its consequences could lead to corruption. Strange, though respectful of Mordo's experience, sometimes bristled at the restraint, feeling that his potential was being artificially limited. The Ancient One, sensing both the impatience and the latent arrogance within Strange, challenged him in unexpected ways. She would manipulate the environment, creating complex illusions that tested not only his magical skill, but his ability to remain calm under pressure. Strange learned to anticipate the unexpected, to question his assumptions, and to embrace flexibility in his strategy. It was in these exercises that he discovered the fragile threads connecting dimensions, and how even a small misstep could cause reverberations beyond immediate perception. During one particularly grueling session, Strange entered the mirror dimension, tasked with defending a series of shifting constructs that attacked him in patterns he had never encountered before. The dimension reflected his own anxieties, twisting his perception and forcing him to confront the fragility of his confidence. Each spell required precision and timing, and he felt his energy deplete rapidly. The Ancient One's voice echoed in the edges of his awareness, guiding him to focus on clarity rather than force. Strange began to recognize the difference between aggressive application of power and intelligent, mindful use. Slowly, he adapted, turning the illusions against themselves, bending the environment to create safe channels and redirect attacks. It was exhausting, but the experience left him invigorated, understanding that mastery of magic was as much about patience and perception as it was about raw capability. Word came that Caecilius had gained strength and was actively recruiting zealots to his cause, threatening to destabilize the balance between the mortal world and the dark dimension. Strange was made aware that the zealots had already launched attacks in several locations, leaving destruction in their wake. Reports of mysterious deaths and disappearances had begun to circulate, and the fear of Dormammu's influence spreading grew among the sorcerers. The Ancient One stressed the urgency of confronting Caecilius before his power became uncontainable, explaining that his understanding of the dark arts was progressing at an alarming rate. Fueled by the stolen knowledge from the Comanche library, Strange felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The threat was real, but he knew that this was the test he had been preparing for. Mordo warned that overconfidence could prove fatal, recalling stories of former students who had been seduced by the allure of forbidden power. As Strange's training intensified, he developed a particular affinity for manipulating time through the Eye of Agamotto. He spent hours exploring its potential, carefully bending the flow of events within controlled environments. By slowing, speeding, or even temporarily reversing moments, he honed his ability to see the consequences of multiple actions simultaneously. This skill became central to his strategic thinking, allowing him to anticipate attacks and devise solutions that would otherwise be impossible. Strange realized that the power of foresight was not infallible. It required constant adjustment and situational awareness. Even a minor miscalculation could create dangerous anomalies, and he learned to respect the delicate equilibrium that governed the universe. His experiments were methodical and disciplined, revealing the layers of reality that most mortals would never perceive. The tension between Strange's personal ambition and his ethical responsibility grew with each passing day. He occasionally questioned whether he truly belonged among the sorcerers, whether his ego would compromise his judgment. The Ancient One encouraged him to examine the motivations behind his desire for mastery, reminding him that true power comes not from personal gain but from service to the balance of the universe. Strange began to reflect on the accident that had ended his surgical career, recognizing that his previous obsession with perfection had blinded him to the fragility of human life. That lesson informed his approach to magic, instilling humility alongside the thrill of discovering new capabilities. The journey was as much inward as it was external, challenging him to reconcile his intellect, ambition, and morality. One evening, Strange was summoned to a private audience with the Ancient One. She demonstrated the final layer of her teachings, the ability to manipulate multiple dimensions simultaneously while maintaining a tether to the physical world. The exercise required immense concentration, discipline, and an understanding of the interconnectivity of all existence. Strange's mind stretched to its limits as he held multiple realities in balance. Feeling the strain on his body and consciousness, he stumbled, momentarily losing control. and witnessed chaotic distortions threatening to fracture the environment around him. The Ancient One intervened subtly, guiding him back into equilibrium. In that moment, Strange realized that mastery was never absolute. Even the most skilled sorcerers depended on intuition, experience, and the wisdom of those who had walked the path before them. Meanwhile, Caecilius continued his campaign, pushing the boundaries of the natural order. Reports from different parts of the world described bizarre occurrences, temporal loops, sudden disappearances, and glimpses of dark, shadowy figures. Strange and Mordo worked tirelessly to interpret these events, connecting patterns that revealed Caecilius' ultimate plan to merge Earth with the Dark Dimension. The urgency of the threat accelerated Strange's training, forcing him to apply his newly acquired skills under conditions that simulated real conflict. Each encounter taught him more about strategy, adaptability, and the dangers of underestimating the enemy. Caecilius' growing influence served as a constant reminder that theoretical mastery was insufficient. The stakes of application were infinitely higher than any classroom exercise. Strange's relationship with Mordo evolved during this period. Initially distant and cautious, Mordo began to respect Strange's ingenuity and determination. Their collaboration required negotiation, compromise, and mutual trust. As each brought complementary strengths to the challenges they faced, Mordo's rigid adherence to the rules of magic balanced Strange's improvisational creativity, producing a partnership that was both dynamic and effective. Despite occasional disagreements, they learned to communicate efficiently under pressure, testing boundaries without breaking them. The lessons of teamwork and responsibility were invaluable, reinforcing the understanding that the universe's protection depended not on individual talent, but on coordinated action. As Caecilius' presence became more audacious, Strange encountered situations that required him to act decisively. Civilians were threatened, and temporal distortions risked spreading uncontrollably. Using the skills he had honed, Strange intervened, neutralizing threats while minimizing collateral damage. Each victory increased his confidence but also reminded him of the precariousness of balance. He realized that magic, for all its power, was only a tool. The choices of its wielder determined the outcomes. His ethical compass guided his decisions, shaping him into a sorcerer who wielded authority with prudence rather than recklessness. Strange's exploration of mystical texts and practical exercises revealed nuances in the relationships between dimensions, energy flows, and consciousness. He became increasingly adept at reading subtle shifts, predicting movements, and manipulating matter and time with precision. These skills proved critical as he prepared to confront Caecilius directly, understanding that the battle would demand a synthesis of knowledge, skill, intuition, and courage. Strange recognized that mastery was iterative, built upon repeated trials, failures, and lessons learned, and he embraced the process rather than seeking instant results. In the final days leading to their confrontation with Caecilius, Strange and Mordo coordinated defensive measures for the Sanctums, strengthening barriers and preparing contingencies. Strange applied his full repertoire of techniques, weaving complex temporal and spatial manipulations to fortify the Sanctums against the encroaching Dark Dimension. Each action required precise timing, foresight, and careful calibration of energy flows, testing his limits both physically and mentally. Mordo provided guidance, ensuring that Strange remained within the bounds of safe practice, while still pushing the envelope of possibility. Together, they balanced ingenuity with caution, creating a protective network capable of withstanding formidable threats. Strange reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a skilled but arrogant surgeon, to a disciplined and innovative sorcerer, capable of bending reality. He acknowledged the sacrifices, the mistakes, and the lessons that had shaped him, realizing that the pursuit of knowledge was inseparable from the responsibility to wield it wisely. The coming confrontation with Caecilius would test everything he had learned, demanding mastery, courage, and the application of every skill at his disposal. As the shadows of the Dark Dimension encroached, Strange prepared himself mentally, emotionally, and physically for the decisive actions that would determine the fate of the mortal world. As the tension escalated, Strange and Mordo intensified their preparations for the inevitable confrontation with Caecilius and his zealots. The Sanctums were fortified with intricate magical wards and energy channels, each designed to absorb, redirect, or nullify attacks from the Dark Dimension. Strange explored combinations of spells that allowed him to manipulate not only space and time but also matter itself, crafting temporary structures and barriers that could hold against overwhelming forces. Each test revealed vulnerabilities, subtle weaknesses in his technique, and required improvisation to reinforce his strategies. He realized that despite all his knowledge, adaptability and rapid decision-making under pressure were just as crucial as raw magical power. In private moments, Strange reflected on the ethical implications of wielding such profound abilities. He considered the thin line between heroism and arrogance, understanding that even a minor miscalculation could cause devastation on a cosmic scale. Mordo noticed these contemplations and spoke openly about his own disillusionment with the rules of magic, revealing a growing conflict between obedience to tradition and the necessity to act decisively in the face of emerging threats. Strange internalized these lessons, learning to balance creativity and responsibility, and recognizing that true mastery involved not only technical skill, but also moral judgment and emotional intelligence. Caecilius' attacks grew increasingly aggressive as the Zealots exploited fissures in the mystical defenses of New York. They manipulated reality, creating illusions so convincing that even the most experienced sorcerers hesitated. Civilian casualties rose, though Strange and the other sorcerers intervened to minimize harm. Strange's unique combination of intellect, training, and the Eye of Agamotto allowed him to anticipate patterns in the Zealots' assaults, revealing a strategy that relied on overwhelming chaos rather than direct confrontation. Using these insights, he countered the attacks with precise, calculated maneuvers that protected the sanctums and neutralized threats efficiently. Each encounter honed his instincts, forcing him to adapt quickly and trust in his growing mastery of magic. One critical night, Strange discovered that Caecilius had set a trap to lure him and Mordo into a temporal loop, a mechanism designed to disorient and exhaust their energy reserves. Entering the affected dimension, Strange immediately sensed the distortion of time and space. Feeling the familiar anxiety of losing control, he relied on the Eye of Agamotto to stabilize the loop, tracing the flow of time and identifying the points where reality could be redirected without collapsing entirely. With Mordo's assistance, he created a localized anchor, a small fixed point that allowed them to operate outside the loop's full influence. Together, they dismantled the trap and regained control, illustrating the synergy between their contrasting styles. Mordo's disciplined caution and Strange's innovative intuition. Meanwhile, Caecilius' influence spread, and Strange observed the Zealots' manipulation of ordinary objects and environments into instruments of chaos. Streets folded in impossible ways, buildings twisted into non-Euclidean forms, and temporal fragments collided, threatening to engulf unwitting bystanders. Strange quickly realized that to counter such widespread destruction, he needed to integrate multiple layers of magic, simultaneously stabilizing the physical, temporal, and dimensional planes. He created looping barriers, reflective surfaces that mirrored the Zealots' attacks, and channels that redirected energy safely into controlled voids. Each step demanded exacting precision, requiring him to anticipate not only the immediate effects, but also secondary consequences across dimensions. The experience deepened his understanding of the fragile balance between order and chaos in magical practice. During this period, Strange also began mentoring new students who had been brought to Kamar-Taj for emergency training. He shared not only practical techniques, but also the philosophy underpinning the discipline, the need to respect the flow of energy, to act with purpose, and to prioritize the welfare of others over personal gain. Strange's confidence as a teacher grew, reflecting his internalization of the principles he had learned from the Ancient One. The responsibility of guiding others reinforced his own discipline, as mistakes in teaching could have real consequences for the safety of the world. These lessons in leadership, patience, and communication strengthened his character alongside his magical prowess. One morning, while meditating atop Kamar-Taj, Strange perceived a subtle disturbance in the dimensional fabric. A fragment of the dark dimension had begun seeping into the New York sanctum, destabilizing localized energy fields. Strange immediately notified Mordo and Wang, devising a plan to contain the intrusion before it could spread. Utilizing the Eye of Agamotto, Strange reversed the flow of corrupt energy, creating a feedback loop that neutralized the invading force. The process was exhausting, pushing his physical and mental limits, but it also revealed the precision and finesse he had developed over months of rigorous training. Each manipulation left him acutely aware of the interconnectedness of all dimensions, reinforcing the principle that no action existed in isolation. As Caecilius' power became more audacious, he initiated a direct assault on the New York sanctum. Strange, Wang, and Mordo confronted the Zealots at the threshold, a clash of cosmic energy and human determination. Strange moved fluidly, combining levitation, energy projection, and temporal manipulation to anticipate and counterattacks. He created complex constructs, shifting floors, and mirrors that deflected destructive energy while simultaneously trapping aggressors. Cochilius' cunning and raw power tested Strange's ingenuity to the limit, requiring continuous recalibration and creative problem-solving. The battle showcased not only the depth of Strange's magical skill, but also the evolution of his strategic thinking under life-threatening conditions. During the confrontation, Strange noticed that Cochilius' zealots had begun recruiting civilians unknowingly, manipulating their perception to serve his purpose. Recognizing the potential for catastrophic collateral damage, Strange shifted tactics, using illusions and dimensional portals to evacuate civilians discreetly. He synchronized actions across multiple planes of reality, ensuring their safety while maintaining pressure on the zealots. This ability to manage simultaneous challenges highlighted the culmination of his training, an integration of ethics, strategy, and technical skill. Strange understood that true mastery required protecting others while neutralizing threats, a lesson that would guide his decisions in every future confrontation. Cochilius, sensing the strength and coordination of his opponents, resorted to more extreme measures. He attempted to tear open a permanent rift into the dark dimension, aiming to merge Earth with the realm of timeless energy. Strange recognized that if Cochilius succeeded, reality itself could collapse. Using the Eye of Agamotto, he froze the temporal flow around the rift, creating a controlled containment field, while simultaneously preparing a counterspell to seal the breach. Mordo provided a stabilizing anchor, while Wang coordinated defensive measures across the sanctum. The complexity of their combined efforts demanded seamless execution and trust, illustrating how collaboration amplified their individual strengths. The battle reached its climax as Strange confronted Cochilius directly within the rift. Time, space, and energy warped chaotically around them. Strange's agility and creativity were pushed to the utmost limit as he manipulated the environment to counter Cochilius' attacks, reversing destructive forces and redirecting them back at the aggressor. Cochilius, empowered by the dark dimension, matched him blow for blow. But Strange's understanding of temporal mechanics and dimensional stability gave him the advantage. By creating a repeating temporal loop that trapped Cochilius in a cycle of his own energy, Strange neutralized the threat without causing irreversible damage. Cochilius' followers were contained and persuaded to abandon their destructive path, severing their connection to the dark dimension. With the immediate threat resolved, Strange and his allies worked to restore the sanctum and repair the temporal disruptions. He reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point, from an arrogant neurosurgeon obsessed with control, to a disciplined, ethical, and inventive master of the mystic arts. The trials he faced solidified his understanding that power without responsibility was meaningless, and that the protection of reality required vigilance, intelligence, and moral clarity. Mordo and Wang acknowledged his accomplishments, while Strange internalized the lesson that mastery was a continuous process, requiring lifelong learning and humility. Strange assumed a permanent role as protector of the New York sanctum, dedicating himself to further study and safeguarding against future threats. The Eye of Agamotto was returned to its proper place, and Strange continued refining his abilities, pushing the boundaries of what was possible without compromising the balance of the universe. The experience reshaped his perception of the world, instilling a deep respect for both the tangible and intangible forces that governed existence. He maintained contact with the Ancient One's legacy, guiding new students and ensuring that knowledge, discipline, and ethical principles were passed to the next generation of sorcerers. Through his trials, Strange understood that the path of the sorcerer was not merely one of power, but of continual adaptation, ethical discernment, and service to a greater cosmic order. He embraced his role as a guardian, ready to confront threats to reality with creativity, precision, and unwavering dedication. The dark dimension had been contained, the sanctums reinforced, and the sanctity of Earth preserved, marking the emergence of a true master of the mystic arts. Following the defeat of Cochilius, Strange faced the daunting task of consolidating his newfound authority over the mystic arts and the sanctums. Although the immediate threat had been neutralized, residual distortions in reality persisted. Subtle anomalies that indicated the dark dimension's influence had not been entirely purged. Strange meticulously examined these anomalies, using the Eye of Agamotto to trace the remaining energy fluxes and ensure that no latent disturbances could escalate into full-scale invasions. Every calibration, every minor adjustment, required precision, as even the smallest misalignment could amplify chaotic forces across multiple dimensions. Wang assisted Strange in cataloging the residual energy signatures and implementing protective wards across the New York sanctum. Together, they enhanced the defenses around key points, integrating complex multi-layered spells that could detect and neutralize energy fluctuations before they became dangerous. The work was painstaking, involving careful observation, iterative adjustments, and the creation of failsafes to address unforeseen variables. Strange applied his scientific mindset to magical principles, testing hypotheses and refining techniques with the analytical rigor of his former life as a neurosurgeon. This synthesis of science and magic elevated his effectiveness, enabling him to anticipate potential crises rather than merely reacting to them. Despite these technical challenges, Strange also confronted philosophical and ethical considerations. He reflected on the Ancient One's teachings, recognizing that the pursuit of power must always be tempered by responsibility and the greater good. Strange grappled with questions about the limits of intervention, the morality of bending time and reality, and the consequences of decisions that could ripple across countless lives. These reflections shaped his approach to magic, emphasizing caution and foresight, while preserving the creativity and adaptability that had enabled him to overcome Caecilius. During this period, Strange began to explore deeper layers of mystic knowledge, uncovering techniques and spells that had been hidden from even experienced sorcerers. He experimented with manipulating the fabric of space-time to create temporary portals between dimensions, construct energy shields of unprecedented strength, and visualize potential outcomes with remarkable clarity. This exploration demanded both patience and humility. The power to alter reality was intoxicating, but misuse could lead to catastrophic consequences. Strange's disciplined study reinforced the principle that mastery was a continuous process, requiring vigilance, self-awareness, and ethical discernment. Unexpectedly, disturbances began appearing in the other sanctums as well. Strange coordinated with sorcerers in London and Hong Kong, sharing insights and synchronizing protective measures to stabilize global mystical networks. Communication across continents relied on intricate astral projections and energy channels that allowed instantaneous exchange of information and collaboration. Strange learned to delegate responsibilities, trusting his allies while maintaining ultimate oversight. This cooperative effort demonstrated the importance of coordination, adaptability, and the integration of diverse perspectives in defending reality against multidimensional threats. Amid these responsibilities, Strange also devoted time to mentoring the next generation of sorcerers. He guided students through the basics of dimensional manipulation, energy channeling, and astral projection, while emphasizing the ethical and philosophical foundations of their practice. Strange encouraged critical thinking, creativity, and self-reflection, ensuring that his students understood not only the techniques, but also the principles that governed responsible magical practice. His role as a teacher strengthened his own understanding, highlighting the symbiotic relationship between knowledge acquisition and instruction. One critical challenge arose when a fragment of the dark dimension manifested in an urban area, threatening to merge with the physical world. Strange quickly responded, using a combination of time manipulation, levitation, and energy redirection to stabilize the fragment. The process involved precise calibration, constant monitoring, and rapid adjustment to counter the fragment's unpredictable behavior. Civilians were safely evacuated, and Strange neutralized the threat without causing permanent damage. This incident underscored the necessity of vigilance and the ability to respond dynamically to evolving dangers. As Strange continued to consolidate his mastery, he began exploring the theoretical boundaries of reality itself. He studied the interplay between dimensions, the flow of time, and the principles governing energy and matter across planes of existence. These investigations led to groundbreaking insights, enabling him to create new defensive constructs, anticipate potential incursions, and devise innovative strategies for maintaining equilibrium across multiple realms. His analytical skills, honed as a surgeon, proved invaluable in synthesizing complex magical concepts into actionable solutions. During this period, Strange encountered remnants of Caecilius' influence, including zealots who had evaded capture and continued to pursue dangerous objectives. Strange confronted them with precision, using a combination of diplomacy, containment, and force where necessary. He demonstrated the importance of balancing power with ethical judgment, ensuring that his actions neutralized threats while minimizing collateral harm. These encounters reinforced his role as a guardian of reality, responsible for maintaining stability across multiple dimensions while upholding moral principles. Strange also navigated political and social challenges. Governments and organizations, aware of the immense power wielded by sorcerers, sought oversight or cooperation. Strange carefully negotiated these relationships, establishing boundaries that protected the sanctums and preserved autonomy while ensuring transparency and accountability. He recognized that his actions had far-reaching consequences beyond the mystical realm, influencing geopolitics, public perception, and interdimensional diplomacy. Strategic thinking, ethical clarity, and persuasive communication were essential in managing these complex dynamics. Through his ongoing studies and interventions, Strange refined the integration of magic and intellect. He developed predictive models to anticipate disturbances, combining observation, experimentation, and theoretical frameworks to guide decision-making. This approach allowed him to operate efficiently, responding to threats with calculated precision while conserving energy and resources. Strange's mastery of both technical and ethical dimensions of magic positioned him as a singular force for safeguarding reality, demonstrating that knowledge, wisdom, and responsibility were inseparable in the practice of the mystic arts. As months passed, Strange became increasingly aware of larger cosmic forces and potential threats beyond Earth. He began exploring portals to other dimensions, studying their properties, inhabitants, and potential hazards. Strange exercised caution, understanding that unbridled exploration could destabilize his world. By carefully documenting phenomena, testing boundaries incrementally, and consulting with Mordo and Wang, he developed protocols for safe exploration. These endeavors expanded his knowledge, prepared him for future conflicts, and emphasized the necessity of humility when engaging with forces far beyond ordinary comprehension. Strange's growing understanding of cosmic balance allowed him to anticipate conflicts before they materialized. He detected subtle shifts in magical energy, interpreted patterns of disturbance, and implemented preemptive measures to avert crises. His actions combined proactive strategy with reactive skill, ensuring that threats were addressed before escalating into emergencies. This dual approach, predictive analysis, paired with adaptable execution, became a hallmark of Strange's methodology. Reflecting his evolution from reactive novice to proactive master of the mystic arts, Strange also reflected on his personal journey. The transition from a self-centered surgeon to a disciplined guardian of reality had fundamentally reshaped his character. He acknowledged the humility, patience, and ethical insight he had gained through trial, failure, and mentorship. These lessons influenced not only his magical practice, but also his interactions with allies, students, and even adversaries. Strange recognized that true mastery encompassed not only technical skill, but also emotional intelligence, moral clarity, and the capacity to inspire others. In addition to his responsibilities at the Sanctums, Strange maintained vigilance over global magical activity. He established a network of surveillance and early warning systems, using mystical artifacts, energy channels, and astral observation. This network allowed rapid detection of anomalies, enabling him to respond efficiently and coordinate with sorcerers worldwide. Strange's strategic foresight ensured that potential threats could be addressed promptly, reinforcing the stability of both the physical and mystical realms. The culmination of these efforts solidified Strange's position as the protector of Earth against multidimensional threats. He integrated ethical principles, intellectual rigor, and practical skill into a cohesive approach that balanced power with responsibility. Each intervention, each lesson, and each decision reinforced his mastery, creating a foundation for continued vigilance and proactive engagement with the forces that could endanger reality. Strange's journey reflected the essence of true sorcery, the harmonious integration of knowledge, skill, morality, and foresight in service of a greater cosmic order. Following the stabilization of the global sanctum, Strange began examining the lingering temporal and dimensional distortions that occasionally manifested despite his previous interventions. These anomalies were subtle at first, shimmering fluctuations in reality, brief echoes of events that had never occurred, and minor lapses in causality that could easily be dismissed as coincidence. Yet Strange's analytical mind, attuned to the intricacies of both magic and physics, immediately recognized these as signs of a deeper instability. Each fluctuation required careful observation and intervention, as even small inconsistencies had the potential to ripple outward and magnify across space-time, ultimately affecting entire cities, or even continents. To address these disturbances, Strange initiated a series of experiments combining the Eye of Agamotto with energy channels from the other sanctums. The process involved monitoring mystical energy flow, testing causality loops, and refining containment spells. By tracking the anomalies to their sources, Strange could identify weak points in reality and reinforce them before they expanded. Wang assisted with the calculations, creating protective wards to prevent any accidental breach of dimensional barriers. Their work required both precision and flexibility. Each anomaly behaved unpredictably, forcing Strange to improvise while maintaining strict control over the magical forces he wielded. During one of these investigations, Strange detected an energy signature unlike any he had encountered before. It was neither fully chaotic nor entirely ordered, but seemed to exist in a state between dimensions. Using a combination of astral projection and scrying spells, he traced the source to a hidden rift on the outskirts of Kathmandu, the same region where Caecilius had first launched his attack. Strange recalled the Ancient One's warnings that some aspects of the Dark Dimension could survive, even after a major confrontation, if left unchecked. Concerned about potential threats, he decided to investigate in person, accompanied by Wang for additional support. Upon reaching the rift, Strange observed a partial incursion from another realm. Strange and Wang worked to stabilize the rift, erecting magical barriers and redirecting unstable energy back into containment. The process was painstaking and dangerous. The energy resisted containment, attempting to seep into the physical world. Strange applied time manipulation techniques, learned from the Eye of Agamotto, creating controlled loops that slowed the encroachment and allowed Wang to reinforce the wards. After several hours of careful work, they successfully sealed the breach, but Strange recognized that this was only a temporary solution. Persistent disturbances in multiple dimensions suggested that a larger cosmic imbalance was emerging, one that required ongoing vigilance. As Strange continued monitoring global mystical activity, he received reports of rogue sorcerers attempting to exploit these energy fluctuations for personal gain. Some were motivated by ambition, others by desperation, but all sought to manipulate the destabilized energy for power. Strange intervened with both strategic foresight and moral authority, demonstrating that unbridled ambition could have devastating consequences. He dispatched corrective spells to neutralize rogue activities, while using diplomacy to realign sorcerers with ethical practice. Strange emphasized that mastery of magic required not only technical skill but also accountability, responsibility, and adherence to a broader cosmic equilibrium. Strange's efforts were complicated by increasing tensions between sorcerers and governments. Nations, aware of the immense power sorcerers wielded, sought oversight or control over the mystical realm, fearing that unregulated magic could destabilize political and social systems. Strange navigated these tensions with care, emphasizing transparency and cooperation, while maintaining the sanctum's independence. He held discussions with representatives from multiple countries, explaining the necessity of respecting the boundaries of the mystic arts, while offering limited collaboration to prevent conflicts and promote global stability. In parallel, Strange began exploring the theoretical limits of the multiverse. Using astral projection, he ventured into alternate dimensions, mapping their structures, energy flows, and vulnerabilities. This exploration allowed him to predict potential points of interference, where reality could intersect with other planes. He documented these findings meticulously, creating detailed magical maps and contingency protocols for the sanctums worldwide. Strange's analytical and strategic approach transformed mystical study from a reactive practice into a proactive science, enabling him to anticipate threats and implement preventative measures before they escalated. Strange also encountered remnants of Caecilius' followers, who had scattered after their leader's defeat. Some had formed secret cults, seeking forbidden knowledge and attempting to harness dark energies for their own ends. Strange confronted these groups, employing a combination of combat proficiency, containment spells, and negotiation to neutralize the threats. He demonstrated the importance of using power judiciously, ensuring that interventions did not inflict unnecessary harm, while preventing the spread of dangerous knowledge. These confrontations reinforced Strange's understanding that true mastery of the mystic arts demanded not only skill but also ethical discernment and strategic judgment. Meanwhile, Strange began mentoring a small cohort of advanced students, carefully selecting individuals with both aptitude and moral integrity. He guided them through the complexities of interdimensional travel, energy manipulation, and time loops, emphasizing the importance of discipline, responsibility, and understanding the broader consequences of their actions. Strange fostered critical thinking, encouraging students to analyze problems, devise creative solutions, and consider ethical ramifications before acting. These mentorship efforts not only strengthened the next generation of sorcerers, but also deepened Strange's own mastery by challenging him to articulate principles and refine techniques in real. Amid these responsibilities, Strange's personal life became intertwined with his mystical obligations. Christine Palmer, aware of the demands on his time and the dangers inherent in his role, maintained contact, providing emotional support and perspective. Strange reflected on the human aspects of his existence, balancing his immense responsibilities with the need for connection, compassion, and reflection. This balance was crucial, reminding him that despite his power and knowledge, he remained a mortal being, responsible not only for the cosmos, but also for maintaining his own humanity. During this period, Strange encountered another phenomenon of cosmic significance, a temporal echo originating from a future where the balance of dimensions had been severely compromised. The echo was fragmented, offering glimpses of potential events, but it conveyed urgency and danger. Strange used the Eye of Agamotto to analyze these echoes, constructing models to determine causality and potential outcomes. The analysis revealed that certain actions in the present could either stabilize reality or precipitate catastrophic collapse. Strange adjusted his strategy accordingly, reinforcing weak points, monitoring potential disturbances, and preparing contingency plans in the event of unforeseen breaches. Throughout these endeavors, Strange also refined his combat techniques. He integrated hand-to-hand combat, energy projection, and dimensional manipulation into a cohesive system that allowed him to respond effectively to multiple adversaries simultaneously. Practice and experimentation honed his reflexes, improved coordination, and expanded his tactical repertoire. Strange's proficiency ensured that he could defend himself, protect allies, and neutralize threats with precision while minimizing collateral damage. By continuously observing, analyzing, and responding to mystical disturbances, Strange created a framework for sustained stability across multiple dimensions. He developed protocols for the detection, assessment, and neutralization of threats, combining technology, magic, and strategic foresight. These measures allowed him to act proactively rather than reactively, ensuring the long-term safety of Earth and its sanctums, while cultivating a deeper understanding of the multiverse. As Strange's mastery deepened, he also began documenting his experiences and discoveries. Detailed records of magical theory, practical application, and ethical considerations were compiled into manuscripts intended for future sources. Strange emphasized the importance of learning from history, mistakes, and prior confrontations, ensuring that knowledge was preserved and accessible. These records became a foundational resource, blending technical precision with philosophical insight, reflecting Strange's holistic approach to the mystic arts. Strange's journey during this period demonstrated the integration of power, intellect, ethics, and foresight. He had evolved from a brilliant but arrogant surgeon into a guardian of reality, balancing immense capability with responsibility and moral clarity. Each decision, intervention, and reflection reinforced his role as the protector of Earth against multidimensional threats. Strange's story illustrated that mastery was not solely about technical skill but also about understanding consequences, maintaining humility, and guiding others toward responsible use of power. By the end of these months, Strange had not only stabilized critical points across dimensions, but also strengthened the foundations of his own understanding. The sanctums were secure, residual threats contained, and protocols for future anomalies firmly in place. Strange's abilities, insights, and judgment had grown, preparing him for challenges that would inevitably arise in the ever-expanding multiverse. His evolution underscored the interplay of knowledge, power, and ethical responsibility, establishing a legacy of mastery, vigilance, and dedication to the preservation of reality itself. After stabilizing the sanctums and reinforcing interdimensional barriers, Strange's focus shifted to the long-term implications of his actions in the multiverse. The Eye of Agamotto had revealed not only immediate threats but also subtle distortions that could evolve into larger crises over time. Strange realized that the delicate equilibrium between dimensions required constant vigilance. Minor fluctuations, if left unchecked, could cascade, creating unforeseen consequences that might affect the timeline, alter reality, or empower malevolent entities. With this understanding, Strange began implementing a monitoring system that combined astral projection, scrying, and energy-sensitive wards to detect anomalies as soon as they emerged. Strange traveled extensively across the cliffs inspecting wards and protective spells, ensuring that each layer of defense remained effective. The New York Sanctum served as the primary hub, from which Strange and Wayne coordinated their efforts. In London, the Sanctum's energy conduits had weakened slightly, a residual effect of Caecilius's previous assault. Strange repaired these conduits, realigning mystical flows and reinforcing the dimensional anchors. In Hong Kong, he found pockets of residual dark dimension energy that had resisted previous cleansing rituals. By weaving intricate containment spells, he neutralized these remnants, ensuring that no lingering corruption could compromise the sanctum or spill into the physical world. During his global rounds, Strange continued mentoring advanced students, providing practical training in controlling energy, navigating alternate dimensions, and handling complex artifacts. Strange emphasized that mastery required not only technical skill but also discipline and moral clarity. Each student learned to anticipate consequences, weigh ethical choices, and act strategically under pressure. Strange personally oversaw tests that simulated interdimensional crises, forcing students to coordinate, improvise, and maintain calm while confronting unpredictable scenarios. These exercises strengthened their ability to think critically and act decisively, preparing them to serve as responsible guardians of the mystic arts. While monitoring mystical activity, Strange discovered an unusual energy signature in a remote region of the Himalayas. The energy resembled patterns he had observed in the dark dimension but was amplified and unstable, as though another force was attempting to manipulate dimensional boundaries. Strange, accompanied by Wang, approached the source cautiously, aware that direct interference could trigger unpredictable reactions. Upon arrival, they found an ancient temple, long abandoned, yet infused with traces of residual magic. Strange examined glyphs and inscriptions etched into the walls, revealing that a group of rogue sorcerers had once attempted to harness energy from a collapsed dimension. Through astral projection, Strange explored the collapsed dimension's remnants, noting that its instability had created fractures in space-time. Energy leaks from these fractures had the potential to destabilize the surrounding world, if left unaddressed. Strange realized that the sorcerers who had attempted to manipulate the collapsed dimension had not anticipated its volatility, leaving residual energy that lingered for centuries. He began a delicate process of containment, channeling the unstable energy into protective wards and stabilizing the environment with spells that reinforced the dimensional lattice. Wang assisted, maintaining synchronized spells to prevent backlash, as even minor miscalculations could have catastrophic consequences. In addition to physical energy stabilization, Strange analyzed temporal inconsistencies caused by interactions with the collapsed dimension. Certain events appeared to loop or repeat with minor variations, creating localized distortions that affected both magical and mundane activity. Strange utilized the Eye of Agamotto to identify the root causes, constructing controlled time loops to stabilize events and ensure proper causality. This meticulous work required extraordinary focus, as even slight errors could amplify distortions or trap individuals within temporal loops. By carefully calibrating his spells, Strange was able to restore continuity, preserving the natural progression of events across both magical and physical realms. Meanwhile, Strange faced unexpected challenges from rogues who had learned of his interventions and sought to exploit the residual energy for their own purposes. Some attempted to breach wards, others tried to manipulate energy leaks, and a few even summoned entities from alternate dimensions to bolster their power. Strange confronted these threats with precision and strategy, neutralizing hostile forces while minimizing collateral damage. He combined combat techniques with multidimensional magic, creating traps, redirects, and binding spells that immobilized adversaries without causing lasting harm. These encounters further demonstrated the need for balance, discipline, and ethical decision-making in the application of mystical power. While addressing these threats, Strange discovered a subtle connection between the residual energy and previously unseen dimensions. Certain energy patterns suggested that disturbances in one realm could propagate to another, creating chains of instability across multiple realities. Strange theorized that even minor interventions in one dimension might have significant consequences elsewhere, reinforcing the importance of foresight and careful observation. He began mapping these interdimensional interactions, creating comprehensive models that allowed him to predict potential anomalies and implement preventative measures. During one investigation, Strange encountered a previously unknown dimension, where time flowed non-linearly. This realm appeared to exist outside conventional causality, with events overlapping and repeating unpredictably. Strange studied the dimension carefully, using the Eye of Agamotto to navigate temporal shifts and discern patterns. He discovered that certain entities within this realm could perceive multiple timelines simultaneously, granting them knowledge of potential futures, recognizing both the potential benefits and dangers. Strange sought to learn from these entities while ensuring that their abilities could not disrupt the stability of his own universe. Simultaneously, Strange's personal life remained intertwined with his responsibilities. Christine Palmer maintained communication, offering perspective and support, reminding Strange of the importance of human connection despite his immense duties. Strange reflected on his own limitations, recognizing that even as the Sorcerer Supreme, he required collaboration, guidance, and reflection to act effectively. He balanced his interactions with other sorcerers, government officials, and magical entities, ensuring that communication, negotiation, and diplomacy were integral to his work. As part of his ongoing efforts, Strange developed a series of contingency protocols to address potential breaches in the future. He established a hierarchy of intervention strategies, identifying critical threats, assigning priorities, and designing stepwise procedures to neutralize disturbances. These protocols incorporated lessons from prior encounters, observations of cosmic patterns, and predictive modeling based on magical and physical principles. By formalizing these processes, Strange ensured that responses to anomalies could be executed efficiently and effectively, even in high-pressure scenarios. Throughout this period, Strange also refined his understanding of magical artifacts, particularly those connected to the multiverse. He examined relics capable of influencing energy flow, time, and dimensional boundaries, identifying both their potential applications and inherent risks. Strange cataloged artifacts, implemented secure storage protocols, and developed usage guidelines to prevent misuse or accidental destabilization. He also studied the interactions between these objects and natural energy currents, enabling him to anticipate interference and adapt spells to mitigate potential hazards. Finally, Strange began documenting his experiences in a comprehensive compendium of magical theory, practical application, and ethical considerations. This work was intended not only for current students, but for future generations of sorcerers. Strange emphasized that knowledge alone was insufficient. Understanding consequences, maintaining humility, and exercising ethical judgment were equally vital. His records reflected a synthesis of empirical observation, strategic foresight, and philosophical reflection, providing a foundation for continued mastery and the responsible application of mystical power. By the conclusion of these efforts, Strange had not only addressed immediate threats but also established long-term safeguards for the sanctums and the broader multiverse. His work demonstrated the integration of skill, intellect, ethics, and foresight, solidifying his role as a guardian of reality. Strange's evolution highlighted the necessity of constant vigilance, disciplined practice, and responsible design, ensuring that he and future sorcerers could navigate the complexities of a dynamic and interconnected multiverse. Strange's awareness of the multiverse deepened as the patterns he had been mapping began to overlap in unexpected ways. Energies he once believed to be isolated now showed subtle resonance with distant dimensions, reacting to changes that should have had no direct connection. These interactions were faint but persistent, like echoes traveling across vast cosmic distances. Strange understood that such resonance was not accidental. It suggested that the multiverse functioned less like separate realms and more like a vast, interconnected organism, where disturbance in one region could ripple outward and affect countless others. To better understand this phenomenon, Strange began experimenting with controlled energy fluctuations, creating small, isolated distortions within carefully reinforced spaces. Wang assisted by anchoring the Sanctum's defenses, ensuring that no test could escalate beyond Strange's control. Through these experiments, Strange observed that certain dimensions reacted almost immediately, while others responded after a delay, as though time itself flowed differently across the multiverse's deeper layers. These findings reinforced Strange's belief that threats might not always announce themselves through direct invasion, but could instead emerge gradually through accumulated imbalance. While analyzing these results, Strange detected a powerful surge originating from beyond known dimensional charts. The energy signature did not resemble the dark dimension, nor did it align with any recorded mystical realm. Its structure was unfamiliar, yet disturbingly precise, as though guided by deliberate intelligence rather than chaotic force. Strange traced the surge's path and discovered that it intersected with several vulnerable dimensional seams, areas weakened by past conflicts and magical strain. Recognizing the danger, Strange prepared for direct investigation. He layered protective spells over his physical form and projected his consciousness into the astral plane, allowing him to approach the anomaly without fully exposing himself to unknown forces. As he traveled deeper, reality itself seemed to shift. Space folded inward, time stretched unpredictably, and sensory perception fractured into overlapping impressions. Strange maintained focus, grounding himself through disciplined thought and controlled breathing, refusing to allow disorientation to compromise his mission. The source revealed itself as a realm shaped by pure intent rather than matter. Its environment responded instantly to thought, reshaping itself, based on emotion and desire. Strange realized that this dimension amplified willpower to extraordinary levels, granting immense power to those capable of controlling their thoughts. However, he also sensed the danger such a realm posed. Any being lacking discipline could accidentally manifest catastrophic outcomes. destabilizing both the realm and connected dimensions. Within this realm, Strange encountered an entity that existed as a convergence of countless consciousnesses. It did not speak in language but communicated through direct conceptual transfer, sharing impressions, warnings, and fragments of future possibility. The entity revealed that instability across the multiverse had increased dramatically due to repeated temporal manipulation, dimensional breaches, and unchecked magical experimentation. Strange recognized his own role in these disruptions, acknowledging that even well-intentioned actions could produce unforeseen consequences. The entity warned that certain realities were approaching a critical threshold. Once crossed, collapse would become inevitable, consuming neighboring dimensions in a chain reaction. Strange absorbed this knowledge with grave understanding. The responsibility he carried extended far beyond individual threats. It required long-term stewardship of balance itself, even when such balance demanded restraint rather than action. Returning to his physical form, Strange immediately began revising his strategies. He convened senior sorcerers from across the Santerms, sharing his findings and emphasizing the urgency of collective coordination. No single guardian, regardless of power, could manage the multiverse alone. Strange outlined a unified system of observation, response, and containment, assigning specialized teams to monitor specific dimensional clusters and report even the smallest anomalies. Training intensified across all sections. Sorcerers practiced rapid response drills, dimensional evacuation protocols, and precision containment techniques designed to neutralize threats before escalation. Strange stressed adaptability over raw power, reminding them that flexibility and awareness often prevented catastrophe more effectively than force. Each sorcerer learned to operate independently while remaining integrated within a larger defensive network. Despite these preparations, opposition emerged from unexpected quarters. A faction of mystics rejected Strange's cautious approach, arguing that the multiverse's instability presented opportunity rather than danger. They believed that controlled collapse could be harnessed to reshape reality according to their ideals. Strange confronted these dissenters directly, attempting reason before conflict. He explained that collapse was never contained, that its consequences spread far beyond initial intent. Some listened, but others refused, their ambition blinding them to the risks. When negotiation failed, Strange acted decisively. Using non-lethal containment spells, he isolated the faction's leaders, severing their access to destabilizing energies. He reinforced safeguards around known weak points, preventing further interference. Though necessary, these actions weighed heavily on Strange, reinforcing the loneliness of leadership and the burden of making decisions that others might never fully understand. Amid these tensions, Strange found moments of reflection. He considered the man he had been before magic entered his life, driven by ego and personal success. Now, his existence revolved around responsibility, sacrifice, and choices that could never be fully shared or explained. Conversations with Wang provided grounding perspective, reminding Strange that growth did not mean abandoning humanity but redefining it through service and humility. Christine's presence remained a quiet anchor. Though separated by vastly different worlds, her understanding and honesty helped Strange remain connected to the human cost of his decisions. She reminded him that protecting reality also meant preserving the lives, hopes, and everyday moments that gave it meaning. Strange carried these reminders into every judgment he made. As Strange refined his contingency systems, he also began developing early warning spells capable of detecting emotional disturbances across dimensions. He theorized that extreme fear, rage, or despair could act as catalysts for instability, weakening dimensional boundaries from within. By addressing such disturbances early, sorcerers could prevent crises before they manifested physically. This approach marked a shift from reaction to prevention, aligning Strange's role more closely with stewardship than warfare. During one such monitoring cycle, Strange sensed a familiar energy signature flicker briefly within the multiversal network. It was faint, fragmented, but unmistakable. Dormammu's influence, long banished, had not vanished entirely. Though barred from direct entry, traces of its presence lingered at the edges of reality, probing for weakness. Strange strengthened protective seals around vulnerable dimensions, ensuring that no entity could exploit emotional or magical strain to force re-entry. Rather than confronting Dormammu directly, Strange focused on reinforcing resilience. He taught sorcerers to recognize subtle corruption, to identify manipulation before it took root. He understood that enduring victory came not from domination but from understanding and preparation. Each lesson, each ward, and each measured response contributed to a broader framework of stability. As Strange's systems took hold, the multiverse gradually settled into a more predictable rhythm. Fluctuations still occurred, but they were identified and addressed with increasing efficiency. Strange observed these improvements with cautious optimism, aware that absolute stability was impossible. The multiverse was dynamic by nature, and change, when guided responsibly, was not inherently destructive. Strange documented his evolving philosophy within his growing compendium, emphasizing balance, foresight, and restraint. He acknowledged past mistakes openly, framing them as essential lessons rather than failures. His writings encouraged future sorcerers to question their assumptions, consider long-term impact, and remember that power without wisdom inevitably led to ruin. Standing within the New York sanctum, Strange gazed across layered realities visible only to his trained perception. He felt the weight of countless lives depending on unseen choices, silent protections, and vigilance that would never be celebrated. Accepting this, Strange reaffirmed his commitment to guarding not just Earth, but the fragile harmony of existence itself. The sanctum had grown quieter in recent weeks, not because danger had faded, but because vigilance had become routine. Strange noticed the difference in himself most of all. Where once every anomaly demanded immediate intervention, he now evaluated disturbances with patience, weighing cause against consequence before acting. The multiverse responded better to measured stewardship than to constant correction, and Strange had learned that restraint could be just as powerful as action. Still, silence never meant safety. A subtle distortion surfaced within one of the monitor-dimensional clusters, its signature irregular but familiar. Unlike raw instability, this disturbance carried intent. It moved deliberately, weaving through weakened boundaries with calculated precision. Strange recognized the pattern as something far more dangerous than brute force. It was manipulation, a guiding influence, nudging realities toward collision without directly revealing itself. Strange summoned Wang and shared the data. Together, they traced the disturbance's trajectory, discovering that it fed on unresolved fractures left behind by earlier conflicts. The scars of past battles had never fully healed, and now something was exploiting them. Wang warned that such an entity could destabilize entire regions without ever manifesting physically. Strange agreed and initiated a silent containment strategy, reinforcing vulnerable seams while masking the intervention itself. Rather than confronting the source immediately, Strange chose observation. He projected his awareness across affected dimensions, studying how the influence interacted with different realities. Some resisted naturally, their structures resilient and adaptive. Others weakened quickly, shaped by fear, unresolved loss, or unchecked ambition. Strange realized that emotional imbalance played a greater role than raw magical vulnerability, confirming his earlier theories. To counter this, Strange expanded his preventative approach. Sorcerers were dispatched not as warriors but as stabilizers, tasked with reinforcing harmony rather than suppressing threat. They worked quietly, guiding energy flows, strengthening dimensional cohesion, and dissolving emotional catalysts before collapse could occur. This strategy required trust and coordination, pushing the mystic community toward a more unified purpose than ever before. Despite these efforts, the manipulative presence adapted. It shifted tactics, redirecting its influence toward realms rich in innovation and ambition. Strange detected increased activity in realities where advanced technology intersected with mystical experimentation. Such convergence created unpredictable feedback loops, amplifying instability. Strange understood the danger of unchecked progress, having witnessed it firsthand in his own world. He intervened personally, entering one such reality where innovation had outpaced wisdom. The environment buzzed with energy, cities suspended between dimensions, powered by experimental fusion of science and sorcery. The inhabitants believed they had mastered balance, but Strange sensed the strain beneath the surface. Their reality trembled under the weight of its own ambition. Strange revealed himself not as a conqueror but as a guide. He warned their leaders of the instability growing within their systems, explaining how imbalance could cascade beyond their world. Resistance met him at first. Pride and confidence blinded them to risk. But when Strange demonstrated the fractures forming beneath their achievements, doubt took hold. Gradually, cooperation replaced defiance. Working alongside them, Strange helped dismantle unstable constructs and implement safeguards that prioritized sustainability over expansion. The process was slow and humbling, forcing the inhabitants to confront the limits of their understanding. Strange remained patient, knowing that lasting stability required consent, not coercion. Elsewhere, the manipulative force grew frustrated. Its movements became less subtle, its influence more forceful. Strange detected an increase in energy output, signaling that the entity was nearing exposure. He followed the trail across multiple dimensions, finally locating a nexus where realities overlapped densely, forming a convergence point of immense power. There, Strange encountered the architect behind the disturbance. The being existed outside conventional identity, shaped by fractured realities, and driven by the belief that collapse was inevitable. It argued that the multiverse had grown too vast, too chaotic to sustain itself. Through collapse, it claimed, order could be reborn. Strange listened carefully, recognizing the twisted logic within the argument. He countered not with force, but with evidence. He showed the entity stabilized realities, cooperative systems, and balanced progress achieved through restraint. He argued that chaos was not proof of failure, but of potential. That destruction born of impatience erased possibility rather than refining it. The entity resisted, attempting to overwhelm Strange's mind with visions of endless collapse. Strange anchored himself, drawing strength from discipline, memory, and purpose. He refused to accept inevitability, believing that choice defined existence more than entropy ever could. Unable to dominate Strange, the entity attempted escape, fracturing the convergence point in desperation. Strange reacted instantly, sealing rifts and stabilizing collapsing layers with precise spells honed through years of experience. The effort pushed him to his limits, draining his physical and mental reserves. Yet he persisted, driven by responsibility rather than pride. With the convergence stabilized, Strange imposed containment upon the entity, isolating it within a reinforced dimensional construct where its influence could no longer spread. He did not destroy it, understanding that annihilation often created consequences worse than containment. Instead, he rendered it inert, stripping it of access to vulnerable seams. Returning to the sanctum, Strange collapsed into exhaustion. Wang monitored his recovery, reminding him that even guardians required rest. As Strange regained strength, he reflected on the encounter. The entity had not been purely malicious. It had been shaped by fear, convinced that collapse was mercy rather than cruelty. Strange recognized the importance of addressing such beliefs before they manifested into catastrophe. In response, Strange expanded educational outreach across dimensions, sharing knowledge about balance, consequence, and responsibility. He encouraged dialogue between realities, fostering mutual understanding rather than isolation. Slowly, mistrust diminished, replaced by cautious cooperation. Strange also revisited his personal boundaries. He accepted that he could not be present everywhere, nor should he be. Empowering others strengthened the multiverse more than centralizing control. He delegated authority, trusting trained guardians to act independently, while maintaining shared purpose. As stability increased, Strange sensed a shift within himself. His role had evolved from defender to custodian, from reactionary force to guiding presence. This transformation brought peace, alongside weight, grounding him in purpose rather than conflict. Standing atop the sanctum once more, Strange surveyed the unseen currents flowing through existence. The multiverse remained fragile, but it was no longer on the brink. Through restraint, cooperation, and foresight, balance had been restored without domination. Strange knew challenges would return. They always did. But he also knew that the foundation now in place could withstand future strain. With clarity and resolve, he turned inward, preparing for whatever threats lay beyond perception, committed not to control reality, but to protect its freedom to endure. The calm that followed the containment was not empty. It was layered, alive with subtle motion beneath the surface. Strange could feel it, while standing within the sanctum. A quiet recalibration rippling across realities, like breath returning after strain. This was not peace born from victory, but balance restored through effort. The distinction mattered to him now more than ever. Days passed without major disturbances, yet Strange remained alert. He reviewed dimensional reports, sensing shifts too minor to warrant intervention, but significant enough to note. Patterns emerged. Realities that had once leaned toward isolation now exhibited tentative connections. Others, long dependent on forceful correction, showed signs of organic. It confirmed his belief that stability thrived when given space rather than command. Wang approached Strange with a proposal rooted in ancient teachings. He suggested formalizing a multiversal accord, not a binding law, but a shared understanding among guardians across dimensions. Strange considered the idea carefully. Authority imposed from a central point had always carried risk, but shared responsibility could strengthen collective resilience. Strange reached outward, contacting guardians, scholars, and protectors he had encountered across realities. Responses varied. Some welcomed the idea immediately, eager for cooperation. Others remained cautious, shaped by histories of domination or betrayal. Strange listened without judgment, acknowledging fears while emphasizing autonomy. The Accord, he explained, would not dictate action, only principles, restraint, transparency, and mutual aid. Gradually, consensus formed. The agreement was established not through ritual or decree, but through intent. Each participating reality adapted the principles to its own structure, creating a network of aligned purpose without centralized control. Strange felt the shift immediately. The multiverse responded with subtle harmony, seemed strengthening through shared awareness, yet balance invited challenge. Strange detected anomalies stirring in distant sectors, not born of malice but of curiosity. Certain realities, inspired by newfound connections, began experimenting with cross-dimensional exploration. While innovation was natural, unchecked exploration carried danger. Strange knew that curiosity, without understanding, could unravel even the strongest foundations. Rather than forbidding exploration, Strange chose guidance. He initiated controlled exchanges between compatible realities, allowing knowledge to flow under supervision. These exchanges fostered respect for difference and consequence. Worlds learned not only from success, but from restraint, understanding that some doors existed for protection rather than conquest. One such exchange drew Strange's attention more closely. A reality advanced in theoretical dimensional physics sought deeper access. Believing it could map multiversal architecture itself, Strange recognized the ambition. It mirrored his own past desire to master understanding without limitation. He visited personally, engaging their scholars in discourse rather than confrontation. Through dialogue, Strange revealed the cost of overreach. He showed echoes of collapsed realities, not as warning, but as lesson. The scholars listened, challenged, questioned, and ultimately revised their approach. They shifted focus from dominance to observation, choosing to study rather than pierce. Strange left knowing that restraint had been chosen willingly, a far stronger safeguard than force. As these efforts continued, Strange felt an unfamiliar pull. It was internal, a quiet call, urging reflection rather than action. He realized that, while the multiverse stabilized, his own journey required examination. Power had once defined him. Responsibility now shaped him. But identity, he understood, required more than role. He returned to Kamar-Taj, seeking solitude within its oldest chambers. There, surrounded by relics of forgotten guardians, Strange meditated not on threat, but on purpose. He confronted the fear he rarely acknowledged, that without constant crisis, he might lose relevance. The realization unsettled him, revealing remnants of ego he believed long gone. Accepting this truth brought clarity. Guardianship was not about perpetual conflict. It was about preservation, patience, and trust in others. Strange released the need to be central. Embracing the idea that his greatest success would be invisibility, a multiverse stable enough to forget its protector. Emerging from reflection, Strange made a decision. He would reduce his direct interventions, stepping back unless imbalance reached critical thresholds. He entrusted Wang and other capable guardians with expanded authority, ensuring continuity without dependence. The network they had built was strong enough to endure without constant oversight. Not long after, a final test arrived. A convergence tremor surfaced near the outermost reaches of the multiverse, faint but persistent. Strange monitored it closely. Rather than rushing to intervene, he observed the response of the network. Guardians coordinated seamlessly, stabilizing the tremor through shared action. No single force dominated. Balance was restored collectively. Strange felt something rare then, satisfaction without attachment. The system worked not because of him, but because of shared understanding. His role had evolved beyond necessity into stewardship, standing once more at the sanctum's threshold. Strange gazed into the unseen expanse. The multiverse no longer felt like a burden balanced on his shoulders, but a living system capable of growth and self-correction. Challenges would come, as they always had, but now they would be met by many, not one. Strange turned inward, focusing not on distant threats, but on the present moment. He allowed himself rest, knowing vigilance did not require exhaustion. For the first time since stepping into the mystic world, he felt complete, not because he held control, but because he had learned to let go. The cloak stirred gently behind him, sensing the shift. Strange smiled faintly, acknowledging the journey that had reshaped him. From arrogance to humility, from control to trust. His path had led not to dominance, but to harmony. As the sanctum settled into quiet watchfulness, Strange stood ready, not as the center of reality's defense, but as its guide when needed. The multiverse flowed onward, resilient and free, protected not by force, but by understanding. The sky above Hong Kong looks torn open, like reality itself is losing its grip. Buildings are frozen mid-collapse, shattered glass hangs in the air, and the city feels trapped between moments. Stephen Strange stands at the center of this chaos, no longer the arrogant surgeon he once was, but not yet fully confident in the role fate has pushed onto him. Wang lies lifeless nearby, and the sanctum is in ruins. The weight of responsibility presses down harder than any injury Strange ever suffered as a doctor. Instinct tells him to fight, but experience has taught him that brute force won't fix everything. Instead, he makes a choice that defines who he truly is now. He uses the Eye of Agamotto, bending time backward, rewinding destruction, restoring the city, and pulling Wang back from death. It's visually stunning, but emotionally heavier, because Strange knows he's crossing a line the Ancient One warned him about. Still, he moves forward, because saving lives has always been his core, no matter the cost. With Hong Kong restored, Strange steps into the dark dimension itself. This is no battlefield in the traditional sense. There's no ground, no sky, no sense of direction. Dormammu's presence is overwhelming, ancient, and terrifying, a force that doesn't understand fear or negotiation. Strange doesn't arrive as a conqueror. He arrives as a problem that refuses to go away. Trapped in an endless time loop, he dies again and again, each death brutal and humiliating. Dormammu crushes him, disintegrates him, mocks him, but every time, the moment resets. What makes this scene powerful isn't the spectacle, but the idea behind it. Strange wins not by overpowering a god, but by outlasting one. He sacrifices his own comfort, his pride, even his sanity, enduring infinite suffering to protect a world that once meant nothing to him. Eventually, Dormammu gives in, agreeing to leave Earth and take Caecilius and his followers with him. The threat ends, not with a punch, but with patience. After the dark dimension retreats, the victory feels quiet, almost hollow. Caecilius and his zealots are gone, but the cost is clear. The Ancient One is still dead, and her absence leaves a deep crack in the foundations of command. Mordo, once Strange's guide and moral compass, can't accept what he's seen. He's disgusted by how easily rules were broken, by how the natural order was bent again and again. Where Strange sees necessity, Mordo sees corruption. Their paths split here, not with anger, but with disappointment. Mordo walks away, carrying a bitterness that feels dangerous, while Strange watches, knowing this isn't truly the end between them. Strange returns the Eye of Agamotto, now revealed to be an Infinity Stone, placing it back under protection. This moment is subtle, but important. Earlier, he would have kept such power close, believing only he could wield it correctly. Now, he understands that trust and restraint matter just as much as skill. He takes up residence in the New York Sanctum, embracing a new role not as a master, but as a student who never stops learning. His hands still shake. His scars are still there, but they no longer define him. The transformation is complete when Strange encounters Thor. There's humor, confidence, and control in the way Strange handles the situation, casually containing a god of thunder while discussing Loki and Odin. It shows how far he's come. He's not trying to prove himself anymore. He simply is who he needs to be. In another quiet moment, Strange examines his hands, flexing his fingers, accepting that the past can't be undone, only understood. Healing, he realizes, isn't about restoring what was lost. It's about becoming something new. The final note of the story lingers on balance. Power always demands a price. Knowledge always brings consequences. Stephen Strange didn't become a hero because he wanted glory or recognition. He became one because he learned to put the world ahead of himself. The journey from ego to empathy, from control to sacrifice, is what makes this story resonate. Doctor Strange isn't just an origin tale about magic and alternate dimensions. It's about humility, growth, and the courage to face the unknown without guarantees. As the doors of the sanctum remain open and the world spins on, it's clear that this is only the beginning of Strange's larger role in the universe. But his personal journey feels complete. The man who once believed he was the most important thing in the room now understands that sometimes the greatest power is knowing when to endure, when to let go, and when to stand alone so others don't have to.